Okay, so imagine this. You're scrolling your feed, right? And suddenly, a professor's tweet just, well, blows up. Not just a little bit, but into a full-blown national debate.
Yeah, and pulling in, what was it, over 1,000 signatures
Uh,
from academics, activists.
exactly, and that's what we're digging into today, this whole situation some people are calling the Great Haryana Professor Saga.
It's definitely more than just noise online. That petition with 1,100 names by early May last year signals something pretty serious is going on around free speech.
Totally. It really shows how quickly things can escalate.
It's quite something, isn't it? How just a few words, like online, can spark such a huge reaction. It really touches a raw nerve, I think, about what we can say, especially, when academics and state bodies get involved.
Definitely. So we're going to unpack this controversy around Dr. Saikat Majumdar. He's an associate professor at Ashoka University and the Haryana State Commission for Women.
Right. It all seemed to kick off with some tweets he posted back in July 2025.
Yeah, and we've been looking at the reports like the Telegraph India had a piece around May 17th last year. It helps lay out the timeline, kind of, and what the main arguments are.
And our goal here, just so you know, isn't to analyze every single tweet or get bogged down in endless back and forth.
No, not at all.
It's more about stepping back, trying to grasp the bigger picture. What are the core issues bubbling up here?
Like freedom of speech, academic independence.
Exactly. And the role of state commissions, monitoring what people say online. We want to understand that without getting lost in jargon. What are the implications, maybe even for you listening?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What actually lit the fuse? What were these tweets about?
So back in July 2025, Dr. Majumdar apparently put some thoughts out on X. Reports suggest they were critical of certain policies or actions.
Right, but we don't know the exact words.
That seems to be the tricky part. The precise wording isn't easily available now, but whatever was said, the Haryana State Commission for Women, the HSCW, definitely saw them as inappropriate or inflammatory.
Okay, inappropriate or inflammatory. That's the official take that kicked things off.
That was the assessment, yeah. And that's what triggered the whole official response.
And this wasn't just a polite, hey, what'd you mean by that? Was it? The HSCW, led by Reni Bhatia, they moved pretty fast.
Very fast. That's a really key point here. They didn't really hesitate. A formal notice demanding clarification and explanation from Dr. Majumdar went out quickly. The speed itself is interesting, a state commission reacting that fast to social media posts. It suggests they saw it as pretty urgent or significant.
But that quick reaction, well, it definitely caused its own reaction, didn't it? A lot of people seem to feel it was maybe an overstep.
Oh, absolutely. The pushback was pretty immediate and loud. By early May 2025, like we said, over 1,100 people had put their names on a petition.
And these weren't just random people.
No, academics, activists, concerned citizens, a real mix. And their main point was that the HSCW's actions felt like harassment.
Harassment aimed at Dr. Majumdar.
Yes, and that it was a direct threat to, well, the core principles of free speech and, crucially, academic freedom.
Okay, so let's paint a clearer picture of who we're talking about. Who is Dr. Saikat Majumdar? Why did this resonate so much?
Right. So Dr. Majumdar, he's an associate professor at Ashoka University. That's in Sonapat, Haryana, not too far from Delhi.
Okay.
He's known, apparently, for being pretty sharp, intellectually speaking, and quite outspoken. He engages publicly on platforms like X, commenting on current issues.
So not just sticking to academic journals.
No, exactly. He's kind of like maybe an academic who takes his sharpest, most provocative ideas from the lecture hall straight to the digital town square, if you like.
Got it. And then there's the other side, the Haryana State Commission for Women. Their involvement seems to be where a lot of the debate is focused.
Precisely. The HSCW, headed up at the time by Reni Bhatia, its job is, really important. Protecting women's rights, dealing with grievances related to women in Haryana.
A crucial role.
Absolutely. But the controversy here is whether Dr. Majumdar's tweets, whatever they actually said, genuinely fall under their mandate. That's the question critics are raising.
Is this an overreach? Is this really their lane?
Kind of yeah. Is a body set up to protect women's rights the right one to be judging potentially inflammatory, maybe social commentary from a university professor?
Oh.
That's the debate. It's like asking a traffic cop to judge a cooking contest, some might say.
Interesting analogy. And Ashoka University. They seem to be stuck in the middle, maybe feeling a bit of déjà vu.
Yeah, it seems Ashoka finds itself in a probably quite uncomfortable spot again. As a private liberal arts university, they often talk about commitment to open inquiry, diverse views.
Right.
But this isn't the first time they've had to navigate this kind of thing, where a professor's public statements cause a stir. There was another incident a few years back.
Oh, okay.
It just highlights the real complexities, the potential clashes when academic freedom bumps up against public opinion or political sensitivities, especially in India.
Okay, let's go back to that petition. Those 1,100 plus signatures. What were the really core concerns driving them?
Well, the big one, the main worry expressed, was about setting a dangerous precedent.
A precedent. How so?
They argue that, look, if academics can be targeted by state bodies, face official action just for social media posts, well, that could create a real climate of fear, self-censorship.
So professors might just stop talking about certain things.
Potentially. They might hesitate to voice critical opinions, especially on sensitive topics, because they're worried about the backlash, the official scrutiny.
It paints a pretty grim picture, like, imagining every tweet or online comment by an academic getting reviewed by some government panel.
Right.
Like they're debating the sarcasm level in a cat meme someone shared. It sounds a bit absurd, but also worrying.
That's exactly the fear they're tapping into, that we could end up in a place where, intellectual debate, challenging ideas just get stifled because everyone's too afraid of saying the wrong thing.
So the petitioners are basically saying, hold on, academic freedom needs protection from this kind of pressure.
Pretty much. They're drawing a line saying this kind of scrutiny on public speech goes too far.
Okay, but let's try and be fair here. What might the HSCWs say? What's their likely justification, putting aside whether we agree?
Well, it's likely they'd argue they were simply responding to complaints they received.
Okay, so they didn't just initiate this out of the blue.
Probably not. They'd likely say they got complaints and were acting within their mandate to address online content that could be seen as harmful, derogatory, maybe even inciting, especially if it was perceived as targeting women.
Right. And without knowing the exact tweets, it's hard to judge that fairly.
Exactly. It's tough to definitively say if their concerns were valid according to their mission, because we don't have the text. But this gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Is the HSCW just, doing its job, protecting people online? Or is it, even unintentionally, silencing dissent, silencing critique? That's the tension.
And this whole thing really brings us crashing back into the big questions about freedom of speech in India, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. You've got Article 19A in the Constitution guaranteeing freedom of speech and expression. That's fundamental.
But it's not unlimited, right? There are always caveats.
Correct. It's not absolute. The Constitution itself allows for reasonable restrictions. Things like public order, decency, morality, defamation.
Reasonable restrictions, that sounds potentially vague.
And that's often where the arguments happen. What counts as reasonable? What's indecent? Who decides? What one person sees as fair comment, another might see as crossing a line. The interpretation is key.
And this isn't happening in a vacuum. We've seen other cases, other people facing trouble for things they've said or written.
Oh, for sure. This case fits into a much broader pattern, or at least a broader debate in India right now. We've seen, comedians facing legal action over jokes, journalists facing pressure for their reporting.
So Dr. Majumdar's situation isn't entirely unique in that sense.
Not in the sense of speech facing scrutiny. The petitioners would argue that targeting academics specifically is particularly dangerous because it threatens that space for critical thinking universities are supposed to protect. It chills intellectual debate.
But then there's the counter-argument, always. Free speech isn't freedom from consequences. You can't just say anything, especially if it's genuinely harmful or offensive.
And that's a valid point, too. People supporting the HSCW might say, look, maybe his tweets did cross a line. Maybe they were offensive or discriminatory or inciting. We don't know for sure without the text.
Right.
But the core dilemma remains, who gets to draw that line? Based on what? And maybe crucially here, why is a women's commission the body making that call about a professor's general commentary? That specific angle is part of the controversy.
It does feel like academia, universities in India have been under a kind of spotlight recently. Is this part of a bigger trend?
It certainly seems that way to many observers, yes. This incident, and others like it, suggest a wider trend where academics expressing views on social or political issues are facing more pushback, more scrutiny.
And Ashoka University keeps popping up in these discussions.
It has become a prominent example, yes, with this case and the previous one. The worry, the bigger concern, is about the long-term effect this could have on India's intellectual climate. If professors feel they can't speak freely, can't ask tough questions, what does that mean for universities?
And what about the public? How did people react as this unfolded? Sounds like it got pretty noisy online.
Oh, very noisy. The reaction was quite mixed, quite polarized, especially online. You saw a lot of outrage from people defending free speech.
Yeah.
But you likely also had a segment supporting the commission, feeling they were right to step in against potentially harmful language.
And the hashtags. You mentioned some earlier.
Right. Things like hashtag stand with psychot, hashtag free speech fiasco. They definitely took off on platforms like X, showing strong feelings on both sides.
And the petition signatories weren't just academics.
No, that's what was striking. It was a real coalition of academics from top universities in India and abroad, yes, but also activists, writers, ordinary citizens. It showed the concern wasn't just confined to university campuses. It touched a broader nerve.
So where did things stand around mid-May last year? Was there any resolution to this standoff?
Well, according to the reports from May 17th, 2025, no. It was still very much ongoing. The HSCW hadn't backed down, hadn't withdrawn its notice.
And Dr. Majumdar?
He hadn't publicly retracted anything either, as far as reports indicated. Ashoka University seemed to be maintaining a kind of neutral public posture.
Trying to stay out of the direct line of fire, perhaps?
Possibly. And that petition, it was still circulating, still gathering signatures, so very much a live issue, a standoff with no clear end in sight at that point.
Wow. It really does make you stop and think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About the kind of society, the kind of public space we want. Is it one where critical discussion, even if it makes some uncomfortable, is, fundamentally protected?
Right.
Or is it one where online speech gets more and more policed?
Absolutely. This case, it goes way beyond just one professor and a few tweets. It's a reflection on these much bigger questions about liberty, state power, and how we navigate disagreement in the digital age.
Yeah, it even makes you think about your own stuff online. You fire off a quick comment, a reply on X, maybe even a WhatsApp forward, without much thought.
Right. You don't really think about it sometimes.
But who's watching? Who might take issue? What could the ripple effects be, down the road? It's a bit unsettling.
It definitely brings home those questions about online expression for everyone. What are the boundaries? What's the potential for scrutiny? It's not always predictable.
And for universities like Ashoka, it must be incredibly difficult, trying to balance that core mission of free thought, academic freedom.
With the political realities, the social pressures that exist outside the campus walls.
Exactly. It's a real tightrope walk.
It truly is. It shows how universities, meant to be these spaces for questioning everything, also have to operate within this complex, sometimes pretty tense, democratic society.
So as this story continues to unfold, or perhaps has unfolded since last May, it leaves us, and you listening, with some really big things to chew on.
Like, what is the right balance between free speech and responsibility, especially online where things spread so fast?
And what is the proper role for state bodies, like Women's Commission or others, in monitoring what gets said online? Where should that line be drawn?
And ultimately, what does this whole saga tell us about where things are heading with free expression in this digital world?
It's definitely more than just a fleeting controversy. It feels like a real wake-up call, maybe, prompting some much deeper thinking about these issues.